Yeah, I want to say hi to Eric too. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Eric. Bruce, you want to say hello to Eric?
Hey, Eric.
Ralph?
Thanks for joining us. Eric, get off my lawn.
There you go. Sparky 107 wants to know how can he get to watch A Model Is Life or listen to A Model Is Life? How can he do that?
If he goes to amodelerslife.com, there's links there to the free site, which is Libsyn and iTunes, and there's other. You can get it on Google Play. He can get it on TuneIn and Spotify. But if he goes to the website, amodelerslife.com, there's links right there.
Zappa Gap.
Yeah. It's a CA type clue. Kevin said Flex-File plastic weld. And Ron was saying MEK.
No, I can use. No, I can weld with acetone. That works. It's beautiful. But I can't print this job in ABS. It has to be PLA.
So what I have here is, you'll see that I've got 9 different LEDs on here, and they're just kind of slowly changing. One comes on, one comes off. You know, it's kind of a slow pace. We could sit here all night watching this very slowly go, but you know, if you actually had these in windows in your different buildings, or even one in each different building, it doesn't even have to be windows in the same building, then you'd want it to go this slow or maybe even slower. And that's about the only thing I'm going to have to show you in the sketch. So we're going to go back to that real quick. Let's build this thing first. So I just put it together so that you could see what we're going to end up doing. And what I'm going to do is just unplug my Arduino and tear this thing apart real quick.
It's your show, right, Andy?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the live build show for Model Railroading Live for May 14th, Tuesday, May 14th. We apologize for the postponement last week, but we're trying to put quite a few people together, as you see in this show. Hopefully, Miles will join us shortly, but we've also added our own Tim Wyman from our community, and of course, our illustrious leader, Big Bill. Of course, we've got Ralph as always, Lloyd as always, and yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're the illustrious leader. So, well, okay, let's leave the illustrious part off. But tonight we want to get into a topic on bridges at large, and I'm generally speaking talking about steel or concrete constructions that bridge constructions that have straight lines. So a trestle will have different considerations. That can be built to a curve, whereas some of the considerations it takes to curve or to build a bridge around a curve on the prototype as much as on the model has some different considerations. There's a few parts to this. I think design and the civil engineering part is as important to make a realistic scene that has a bridge passing over a waterway, road, valley, whatever it needs to clear on our models as much as on the prototype. I think the civil engineering part may be as important. And figuring out the design considerations, especially as most bridges either have clearance considerations to deal with, above, below, height, as well as, and maybe as much as the side-to-side clearances that could especially be constraining if you're dealing with a curved situation. I'll show you shortly one of the bridges that I've worked with and how I've designed mine. We'll talk a little bit about scratch building. We're going to talk about some of the different bridge considerations and such, but let's start from the beginning. So from a design perspective, covering a gap in a railroad, whether you've built the gap in scenery first, whether you're talking entirely from a design perspective, what's your guys' thoughts on the process to do it? How do you get from, I've got a gap I want to span, to getting a track work, a radius, a track alignment? I think that's the biggest consideration. Figuring out track alignment, clearances, heights, and where abutments and bridge piers go and all that stuff. Where do you guys land on the civil engineering, and what tricks have you guys found that makes your life a little easier in that arena? Anybody want to
go first?
All right, the smellers and fellers, so you need to go first. How about that, Ralph? What do you think? What's your thoughts? Because you've got a pretty significant bridge situation. Well, it's a series of bridges across yours.
It is. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bridges. One of them is 8 feet long. One of them is a wooden trestle, which is 3 feet long, and it's shaped like an S. But mostly it's all plate girder, which my fascia is done the same way, in keeping with the bridge thing. So I've taken the masonite to make it look like bridge girder with rivets and so on. But I sent you some photographs the other day, Andy, of these bridge parts.
You did? I'll get those up momentarily.
Okay, hang on a second. I'm just going to show you how it starts off. The bottom one is the original color. Let's get rid of the glare. The bottom one's the original color, and I fade them down. And then I add the gouaches and so on to get the rust techniques. But the fade is, to me, a paint. It's 10% paint and 90% alcohol, airbrushed. And I do it from approximately 60-degree angle down, so that underneath the lip, the top lip, it stays almost like new, because the sun doesn't go there. And then when you add your rust to it, it sort of covers it up a bit, and I do the same with the black bridges. I fade it down. That was black. It looks more like a gray now, with oil paints made into a wash, and let the oil paints flow into all the corners. And sometimes you have to do it maybe twice or 3 times to get it to flow the way you want it. But you really don't know what the result is going to be until it dries. It's white. I always use white. And especially when using this, the green, especially when I'm fading the green, I'll add a couple of drops of red to my wash. Only because if you look at a color wheel, there's your primary colors in the middle. The opposite of red is green, which is down here. So you got red there, there's green. So if I want to do the green paint, then I add a couple of drops of red. And what it does is it cuts the vibrance of the red color or the green color down to more like a pastel color. And with the white as well, it tends to wash it out. And if I'm going the other way, if I'm doing it on red, then I'll add green to my paint, my white wash. And using the color wheel, I always use the opposite of the color you're painting on, and it'll help you pick out or tone down the colors, because a lot of the time you don't want the vibrant color unless it's a brand new bridge. One of the scenes I'm going to do, I've got right along here, I've got this 8-foot long bridge. I'm going to do some guys hanging on Bolson's chairs, painting it. So it'll be a fresh paint color.
Or half of the bridge or something, up to where the painters are or something. That's interesting. That's those little vignettes we've talked about, the little things that are telling a story. I thought that's interesting as well. And it gives you a chance to do some different weathering techniques or lack of weathering.
I did the same for my fascia. I started out with a green color. I faded it the way I wanted it. And once I got the fade the way I want it, I went to the paint store and had them make me up a color like that, so that I didn't have to fade it every time I do a section of panel. So now I have a green that I use for the fascia, which is similar to the green that's on here. And then I rust it on top of it using wood stains.
Those Central Valley or ME, Micro Engineering, rather?
Actually, these bridges, this one here is Micro Engineering. It's part of my bridge. This is what I did, is I used an aluminum channel.
Yeah.
And I'm gluing this on the side of the channel with epoxy. But the other ones are a proper plate girder bridge that I cut the base off.
Explain cut the base off. What do you mean? You cut the bottom? I
cut the bottom off the bridge from the inside. So there's my 2 panels. The bottom is missing.
Okay, I see. The bottom, yeah,
the bottom
cab, whatever.
It's one piece bridge. You actually cut the bridge deck out of it.
Yep. That's right. What are you going to do? The deck.
So is that going to go? That goes toward the top, and is that going to be a ballasted deck that you're working with? So will it go up against what on the prototype bit of concrete?
Actually, surface? these particular ones, these were done as samples for me to get the process set up and determine what I was going to do. After that, it doesn't really matter. I can work on a complete bridge. It doesn't matter. It works for me. There's another bridge I have on my layout. Hang on a second here. I'm going to share screen if I can. That bridge goes over my harbor. And where you see that wooden piece going across, the bridge is going to replace it. and it was painted with the same color as this. And I haven't weathered it down yet. It's been faded, but it hasn't been weathered yet. Let's see. Oops, wrong way. No, I guess I don't have it. So that's my bridges, basically. I have truss bridges. I have plate girder bridges. I have a wooden Howe truss bridge that I'm going to build at the end of this 8-footer. And then there's these ones in behind. These are Atlas. These 3. All rusted up. And I use regular artist oil. And when I do the rusting in the center of the panel, it's done with gouaches and a sponge.
So I brought Tim and Bill on too for a couple of different reasons. Both of them have some interesting bridges. And actually, let's talk a bit about since we'll talk about the civil engineering parts. Tim, I want to get some instinct from you. First, you had scratch built a through Pratt, I think, or whatever, that was really interesting to me. And of course, I want to get some of your feedback about scratch building versus versus doing the scratch build versus the Central Valley, which you also have one of as well. But on the civil engineering side of figuring out the track alignment, etc., I'd initially talked to you a little while ago about bringing you on the show for the discussion of the bridges, especially the one you had scratched about. However, we spent the last week or so discussing a bunch of civil engineering about track alignments, considerations on yours. So what's your instinct about that? Have you found anything that's made your life a little easier to actually develop a track alignment, worry about clearances, heights, etc.?
Clearances, you got to measure. You got to find out how high your train. If you're going to clear another track, you definitely got to know how high you need to clear. I mean, plus you want to probably allow a few centimeters or millimeters or fraction of an inch above that. Just as good measure. What we've been doing lately, or what I've been doing lately on the layout, is I'm getting ready to put in a bridge that goes over a yard. And it's going to loop back down into the yard on sort of just a one-level helix. So it's been a kind of a fun issue trying to figure out how much, because I don't have a very long distance to climb that I can climb in. As for coming down, that's not an issue. I've got plenty of room on the other side of the layout to come down into it. The problem was coming off the main layout into the yard module. And climbing up to be able to reach the bridge and go over, the clearance. The bridges, I bought some Walthers 90-foot and 70-foot deck girder bridges, and they're pretty tall as far as clearances. So I found out that I had to drop one of my yard module. I had to drop it about 2.5 inches, and I was able to climb another 1.5 inches by the time I reached the bridge, which gives me about a 2.42% grade. What I figured out today after actually laying a board across and measuring what it was going to take to actually reach the top of the bridge. I set the bridge up in place at the proper height, and then I laid a board across from the layout over and actually measured the grade to make sure I was within where I needed to be. Because I'm not going off a track plan, everything fly by the seat of my pants. So it gets a little bit fun. Where I came in with that Central Valley bridge, that thing is a lot longer than what somebody would actually think for. A 150-foot bridge is a long bridge, especially when you're doing a smaller layout. Now, for some of us that are doing bigger layouts, I'm doing a fairly good-sized layout. 150-foot bridge, it's not that big a bridge, but it's a lot of distance to span. show you.
And that is a consideration that I did want to get to when it comes to bridge types is the choice of bridge types you have, which is also a good point for just a moment while you're kind of adjusting there to speak to Bill about. And I definitely want to get back, Bill, and talk to you some about the unique weathering technique that you applied to your bridge. But just when it comes to the consideration of your bridge, I know you're loosely modeling a prototype, but I'm headed somewhat. But did you what led you to the bridge construction that you're using on yours, or actually the bridge choice? I think would be my biggest question.
I didn't really have I really didn't. Got to be honest with you, I really didn't put much thought into the bridge. The only thing that originally happened was that if you guys can, let me sit, get out of the way here. Oh, there we go. You'll see down here, this is where we're standing. This was the original height of the bridge. I'm the layout right to here.
Yep.
Mr. Baronic told me this was impractical because it was too low for me to work on. I'd be bending over all the time. It would be a discomfort. So he said you gotta raise it up about 7 to 8 inches. So I had to make U brackets because I had already built the framework. I had to make like 1,001 U brackets and slide them between and screw them in. But this was the only section because you see there's a window here. And I needed to get access to the window. So this is just one long piece of flex track and it's not soldered, it's floated in there. So I needed to get, these needed to come up and be accessible so I could get to the window to put an window air conditioner in here. So Mr. Baronic suggested this is a 5-foot span from one end to the other, and I could get 3 bridges. So these are all Walters bridges that are taken right straight out of the box. And basically what I did was I put them together, and then excuse me, and then I primed them. I primed them at Black Greg automotive paint, actually. And other than that, what had happened was I was over at a friend's house, and his wife, she does arts and crafts. She was doing this vase with this chemical called Sophisticated Finishes. And she painted this on and let it set up and dry, and then she put this chemical over it. And while we were there having coffee and cake and just hanging out, I went back in with her to see what it would look like, and it was this beautiful tinged orange color. And I was like, that looks interesting.
Yeah.
So she said, you get it on Amazon for $11. Well, so I ordered it. It comes in 2 bottles, and what it is the black paint. Ralph has used it. What it is black paint, and it's got iron chips in it, little iron chips in it. And then when you paint it, and then you put the chemical on it, the chemical reacts and gives it a rust finish. So all I did basically was wherever I thought, the rain would hit, and the bridges, this railroad is an urban railroad, so it's a 70s, late 60s, early 70s, basically decay urban bridge over a river. And so I just, just indiscriminately put it where the joints were and, everywhere around. And then I just brushed it on, and it came out, I think it came out pretty good. I mean, it's got some heavy rust, and then it's got some light. And then what I did was I just used chemical on the girders on the inside where the rail sits, and it kind of like flaked it a little bit. So it's for me, it's reached that design. I'm not I'd like to say that I'm in the process. I'm going to do a kit bashing kind of structure from this and, scratch build a bridge. But a man's got to know his limitation. And I want to get back into, operating the railroad and running trains. Right now, I've spent almost about 6 months redoing the peninsula and rearranging the yard track. So I'm all finished with that, and I'm adding little details as I go around. So, but this is the bridge, and I got to be honest with you. Everybody who's ever come in to see the layout has always commented on this section, which I find extraordinarily strange, because if I had sat down and planned and went to the computer and drew a 3D dimensional outlook on this thing, the center of the river would have been over here. And all this would have been land, and it would have been like totally backwards. But I didn't think, I have to be quite honest with you, I didn't think about this. All I did was I said, well, what would I want? And I knew that I had to have the river here, so I just sat down and played with this for a couple of nights. And then I broke up some styrene and some foam board, and I just chopped them up and put them in underneath there, and then laid some plastic cloth over it. And over here, what happened was when I put the pilings down, two pilings, the bridge was off by a ½ inch as it came down. It came down, it was off by a ½ inch, and then it went down again, another. And then when it went to the end, it wouldn't meet the concrete post to sit on. It was below that. So I didn't know what to do down here. I didn't know how to raise this up. I was like, I really truly was baffled. And this sat here for like 5 days. Until one day I was in Lowe's and I was buying mouse traps for my mother. And I looked at the board that the mousetrap was built on, and I said, this is just cut the right way. It's the exact thing I need. All I got to do is take all this hardware mousetrap off, and I have a board. And that's exactly what I did. I took the board, spray painted it, and then put it down under here, and it gave me it. This is what I mean by accident. It leveled itself out. I could put a level on this, and the bubble's going to hit center, all because of this board. And everything here, where the river flows out of the center, that's all by accident. This is not. I'd like to take the credit and say I worked 14 days on this and came up with this plan. I didn't. This was all like whatever. If it didn't work, I tore it out. If it did work, same thing with the bridge. I did it the first time. I spray painted it. I lathered it up in the sophisticated finish. I dumped half a bottle of chemical on it. It came out. It was like, no, that looks terrible. It was too orangey, and it just didn't give the effect of rust. And I resprayed it again. And that's the beauty of it, And just as I go along, it's just, I guess that's what happens. Perfection happens by accident. Like I said, it's not perfect.
Serendipity, never underestimate a happy accident. Many times, the best laid plans of mice and men don't work out or what have you. And a happy accident may be some of the favorite things I have about my railroad were never the intention from the beginning. So all the planning in the world. And while I think it's important to do the right amount of civil engineering, so to speak, in model form to figure out the right bridge and how to get the alignment right, don't underestimate the value of a happy accident or just putting it in there until it works too.
Well, yeah, that's true too. Again, the architectural, and I have no background in that. The only thing I know how to work is a TV and a radio. So my architectural engineering aspect is nothing. Zilch, donut, nada, nunca.
Well, and what I'm talking about the civil engineering part really is more glorifying the track alignment and the design of figured out not just the right bridge for clearance reasons, et cetera, but how to get the track alignment right. In your case, it is a straight bridge going across. That does ease some of it. You still have some things like slapping a level on it that are absolutely critical to getting that alignment right. And it may be eased somewhat, but there's still, my favorite things about railroads are the favorite things that a lot of us have about railroads, bridges and tunnels, and these few, these things that were really challenging on the prototype are also really challenging, but also really fascinating on our own railroads. Reason I'm modeling what I'm modeling is because it's a lot of bridges and tunnels in a particular area. But getting to a lot, that's tough.
Just to jump in there, I think that the thing that I've always applied in my own life is nothing ventured, nothing gained. When I undertook this, and this was actually the first piece of scenery that was done, and the bridge wise. And as far as the level, everything else prior to this, moving up into this room, was downstairs in the basement. I had one inverted dog bone layout, and then I had the rest of them. After that one was torn down, the next two were basically 2 4x sheets of plywood tethered together and make one long 4 by 16 feet. So this was the first actual intricate engineering from soup to nuts, wiring, structural build of the layout itself, the wooden part. But this was actually the first part, and I have to be totally transparent here. I was very apprehensive about doing this because this was something that was new and I've never attempted it before. And my lovely wife said to me, "What's the worst thing that can happen?" And that's exactly, she was right. What's the worst thing that could happen? The bridges were made. If it was too short or too long or whatever, just start over again, But I was glad the way it came out. I was happy for the ending of it. And, this was the building block for the rest of the layout, then it gave me the confidence to say, hey, if I got this done, I was capable of doing this and doing some critical thinking and 3D thinking, basically. That's what, you got to read the blueprints. You got to overcome and adapt when you run a problem. So it was pretty good, Like you said, clearance-wise, the only thing under here is the water, simulated full water here. So there's no train ever going to pass under here. That's I didn't have to take that.
Bridge is going to have full water under here. The other thing I had to accommodate for was you have to have room to put the bridge in plus scenery for your abutments.
Yes.
So the actual hole for my bridge is almost 2 inches bigger than what the bridge is. And
absolutely.
Out to it.
Bill's got some sloping scenery on his as well. And abutments and piers, you've got to plan for a lot more than, you look at the manufacturer packaging. This is 19 3/4 inch, real world size. There's a lot more to it than that too. That's why for all the value of CAD software, there is a value in constructing the bridge and then building the scenery back to it, or building the scenery and cutting it in and scratch building the bridge to fit in. That's why getting that alignment right is tricky, because it's not just clearances when you have tracks passing underneath. That is obviously a big consideration, but making a believable scene, having clearance so that it's believable.
And something else, like my bridge, my river is going to curve around behind. So there's a curve in the river behind it. Kind of give it a little bit more depth to the space. It only goes back there about 2 foot, but when you're down here looking at it like this, it looks like it's a lot deeper than 2 feet. Because it's got that, river bend in it.
Right, I did that on mine, but as you know, my layout's only 2 foot deep. One of my rivers crossing across the layout is probably 6 or 7, 8 feet long. Actually, in 2 places, it's about 8 feet long because it goes quite diagonal. Comes across under the bridge, curves, it goes way back to the backdrop at a very shallow angle. So it looks like you can't tell in that one case, you can't tell where the river meets the backdrop. So, scenery and cosmetics of that alignment are critical too. But getting the alignment, and I've covered this trick, and then I want to get some input back from Lloyd. I think he's joined us now too. He did some really interesting stuff with the trestle he built too. That's particularly interesting. In my case, I needed to get a particular alignment. as most of you guys know, I'm a prototype modeler, so I was working off of prototype photos. In this case, it has 3 through girders or through plate girders. That's very little depth below the track alignment with its construction. It's through tie, and now in my case, the bridge it starts with a turnout near immediately off the bridge. On the prototype, the turnouts or the point motor or turnout mechanism or switch mechanism is only about 5 feet off the abutment. So it comes off a turnout. It has an easement going into the curve. So, and it's hard to tell from here, but this angle here or this angle here is much shallower than this angle here because there's an easement as the track comes into the curve. What I found that worked best in my case was to lay flex track across, and that'll bring it to relevance with some of the tricks that Lloyd employed on his. But I laid flex track across it, and then I cut foam core larger than what I was working with here. Put the markings for the flex track on it, and I put markings under the rail and under the ends of the ties. Of course, a bridge track, your ties are going to be much longer, but I wanted those lines to work with. And then I made sure those lines were correct, and then I sprayed adhesive and stuck some wax paper down. That's will peel up easily and I can peel the ties up from this easily once I'm done with the construction. And then I worked with clearance points because there's these pinch points where locomotives would drag or would hang on some of these angle. It's easier to see here. There's angles on the inside of this. So when you have your track in there, be it, bridge track, flex track, whatever, there's some angles. And you've got to worry about the clearances of those when they're in a curve. Now, I did build my bridge, much like this because this is exactly what the prototype has. It has 3 plate girders and a deck girder approach on either side. Short deck girder approach, and those deck girder approaches meet the abutments that are askew. So the abutment is at a very very oblique angle or very wide angle because the river is coming across at a weird angle, and the river is curving in one direction, and the track's headed across or headed across in an angle as well. And the flex track and that's part of the reason that I really love the microengineering flex track is it holds its radii, it holds its curvature, so I could use it to mark out alignments, and I could get my easement right with the bent stick method that I prefer, and then work with the clearances. Lloyd, did you make it back?
Yep.
Good deal. You did something similar with the flex track arrangement, especially with the way you'd done your ties, that I found really fascinating how you did that. Will you give us I
won't be able to show you the bridge because I'm in my workspace, but I got the pictures.
Awesome.
So I'll show you. I'll start by.
We like pictures.
Okay, sharing. Okay, this is my gorge. And as you can see on both sides, I've got my tracks. When you were talking about engineering and how I was going to do my tracks, if you want. So what I did is I put a piece of board right across, and I installed the flex track to get my curve. And once I did that, I took a piece of flex track and used a curve, which I had drawn on a piece of wood, and put it upside down. I don't know if you can see that there's a pencil line for the curve.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So what I started doing is removing one tie at a time, every 5th tie, and putting in a wooden one instead. And once I used a contact cement or a crazy glue to make sure that the ties would keep the form of my tracks. So I had to wait till it dried. Then So once I was finished, it would look something like that. And it's very strong. I mean, I didn't force it there, but I tested to see the spring of it, to see if it would take back, like go back straight, but it didn't. It really kept its shape.
Yep, I lay all by rail with contact cement. And I think it's especially useful on a bridge. While I've seen it done with spikes and go back after the fact and cut the spikes out, I lay by rail with contact cement. And even if you spiked your track, if you hand laid your other track and spiked it, you could use printed circuit ties, but that would work great as well. Like if you're using fast track turnouts or what have you. But contact cement works great, and you could use a soldering iron to set it nearly as fast, not hardly, but nearly as fast as super glue, crazy glue, whatever.
Yeah. Here I put like a little siding, a ramp, or what do you call it?
Oh, those water platforms.
Those, yeah, the water platforms, and there's like a walkboard. Oh, okay.
No, it's actually stops the wheels from going off the end.
Oh, that's called a guard timbers. Guard timber. Yeah, I did that. I've got guard timbers on mine as well. And I made they make shallow angles. So I had to cut each piece, and because I'm going to put nut bolt washer castings, NBW castings on them, I cut angles at each of the mating points. So it makes ever so slight angles as it works its way around the curve. It's got the guard timber on one side so far.
I did do my research first to find out what they look like, or if somebody had built one. So that's where I got my idea. It's not just coming off my head here. And
now that's something I think is kind of a key, is do your research on bridges if you're going to put one in. You look at the scenery around them, look at how the bridge is constructed, look at how it ties into the scenery.
Well, the right type of bridge from, I don't have I don't have like a Pratt or a through or anything, but you've got, you know, a deck girder bridge that is track setting on top of plate. This is good when you don't have to worry too much about clearance. These are less expensive for the prototype to build. They build them, and Microengineering provides these plastic pieces to build the concrete deck sections. I glued a couple of these together because this is how I was going to do one and ended up not doing it for types of history. And to make it look like concrete, I sprayed it with an oil spray and then dusted it with talcum powder to get a little bit more texture that the camera would never pick up. But these are supposed to work like, you know, like that kind of arrangement to make a concrete deck. So there's that.
For ballasted deck.
That's right. Yeah, ballasted deck. Thank you. And then when clearance becomes more of a concern. So on my prototype or on my layout, I have a bridge like this, actually this bridge that goes over a road, and then it goes on over a river. So it mates from this to a much longer, you know, deck girder as it goes on across the river. So it's choosing the right type of bridge, or if you're covering a very tall area like what Lloyd is covering there with, as he's showing us his bits for the trestles, you can either do that with a wood trestle or with the steel trestles, or a viaduct or steel viaduct, as I'm doing on as per what my prototype did. I've been building these towers for mine as well.
Yeah, so those are my trestles that I built. Again, it was from a plan. And so that's it for my trestle. But I was going to show you just where, for example, when I built my my covered bridge, I found some plans on the internet, for example, like this, and just started using that to build it.
Yeah, that's pretty detailed plan, because I mean you can see the abutment and everything on it.
Yep.
And how it ties into the ground surface.
Well, there's a lot of mating pieces that you've got to do some research on. And of course, if you're modeling a prototype, that's why when we spoke on one of the recent views, Model Railroading Views series show, and I think Ralph actually, if I'm not mistaken, made this point, but that modeling from a prototype is easier. You could just go look at the pictures. This bridge is a prototype. It's an approach deck girder. It's 3 plate girders on a bridge or through girders on a bridge, and then a deck girder on the approach. So I could just build it on the prototype. Now I have to deal with the differences from the prototype to the model, because on the prototype the curve radii is so much wider, obviously. But we can't do that. So I have a lot more clearance concerns to deal with the build by. But I could just look at how the prototype built it and how the deck girders joined to the through girders was using some steel components that span those gaps, and they have a plate that makes that piece of steel eye that mates to this girder. I would have thought they would have run the girders all the way out long, but all the way out to it. But the girders are stepped back just a little bit so that the bridge ends correctly on the abutment. And then there's some steel I-beams that carry the ties across that couple feet of gap, where this has to meet at an angle because it's continuing that curve radii.
Andy, can I take a minute to answer Dwight's question?
I'd love you to.
I'll try to. I don't know if you can see, Dwight. What I use to do my abutments is just basically a piece of wood, and it's covered with 3D printed paper of bricks. So it's simple
embossed paper.
Yeah, embossed paper. Sorry. So yeah, it was all done with wood.
Speaking of abutments and piers, what else does everybody else use? So we can cover that while we're discussing abutments and piers. I built some out of styrofoam, but I would consider those temporary. They're adequate, but I intend to cast mine from Hydrocal or dental plaster at some point. My abutments are dental plaster purchased from New England Brownstone at newenglandbrownstone.com. But what else have you guys used?
I was up in Vermont, and I took home a piece of Vermont marble, and I worked this on a lathe downstairs, where I cut out the marble and sculpted it to look like an abutment. This is like a Vermont marble piece, and I actually scored the lines in, gave it the rough view like it was a brick.
And what would you say? That's maybe a year, 2 years of your life. It's worth it. No argument for me, but a year, maybe 2 years of your life building those?
Actually, a year and 6 months on each one of these. So that was 2 years, almost 3 years of working these two abutments.
Absolutely worth it. Worth every moment of it.
I built mine out of styrene, and that way I could, custom build them to fit the bridge that I had. And then I scored concrete pour lines in it after that and painted them.
It might have to be custom built as well, and that's why I've used styrofoam at the moment and painted them, and even got some. And what I've done is use styrofoam and then skim coated them with spackle and sanded some mortar lines in them, and they're adequate as placeholders, much like using a kit as a placeholder until I scratch build a replacement structure. I probably will not lathe marble. And I would just use chooches or something like that if I could find it. The problem I have is where many of my bridges are multiple types of bridges in one assembly, and they mate at where now we call them bridge shoes, but Chris Rood from our community is a civil engineer by trade for the state, and he calls them bearings for the bearing surface. That's what the prototype or the civil engineer guys call them. So your bearings, and
because they're plates, not shoes.
Well, I suppose that would make a difference too. Sure. In my case, there has to be a step in the girder because where the bridge shoes mate, it's at different elevations, and that when you have multiple bridge types used together, if you're using through bridges like Big Bill's using there. Or through Pratt trusses or whatever they are, and then using deck girders as approaches, or multiple bridge types together. That's what I think it gets really interesting, is using multiple bridge types together. Trestles with a little bit of steel in them is really fascinating to me. And when you use multiple bridge types, abutments just about have to be custom, or you've got to do a lot of custom work.
Here's one custom.
Wow.
It's actually the one on the left and the one in the middle. The top part is actually plastic that comes with the Atlas bridges.
Oh,
The bottom is all plasterwork, and the bridge abutment at the end is it's not Chooch. What is it? Woodland Scenics that I made a mold of.
That's so
gorgeous. It's all plaster, except for those two plastic ones. And then,
those are beautiful.
There's my 8-foot bridge. So I have to make piers, the bottom concrete for these, I guess you call them bents. I don't know.
Yeah, towers is what microengineering calls them, towers.
Okay, so because there's two different levels here, I have to get an I-beam that covers the distance.
Right, that's what
they support one.
Do. So they provide some steel I-beam that sets in the top of that you can make a mating, a different mating height.
I was going to use evergreen styrene.
Sure.
And there was another one. Where did it go? I don't know whether you're going to be able to see this very well. This bridge abutment is all plaster as well, although these two bottles are away, but it's plaster brick. And I made a piece of cardboard or styrene box to put on the top. I sprayed it with a textured paint to make it look like concrete. And it's two different levels. You got the one bridge comes here and the other one's up on top. And this arched part of the bridge is a European style bridge. And to make it look more North American, I put a plate girder on top. This bridge was designed for double main line. I have single. And the problem you had with those little angles holding your plate girder, interfering with the trucks and so on, I had the same problem with this bridge up here. 6-axle or 3-axle diesels would knock it as it went around because it goes off of here into a corner.
It's curved at the end of it, I think you're saying?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't notice that before.
Well, my track work is curved.
That's my favorite seat on your entire layout. And I love that you use that, whatever it is, Valber or whomever made that arch bridge, and you stuck those girders on top of it to kind of Americanize it.
Fowler,
sure.
And this is all plaster work as well. So I made the bridge and I built up the plaster work to the bents instead of the bents down to. So in some cases I have holes drilled into the abutments so that the bent fits in because I didn't want to trim it anymore. And in some cases they just sit right on top.
Yeah, speaking of that, before we get too far away from it, there's a neat trick for making the feet, the concrete pedestals that your tower or bents would go on. And from my understanding, if you are building a narrow gauge or a low weight steel girder bridge, you would not use this tower assembly with the X crosses. It would use it if you buy the microengineering product that is their lightweight bridge. It is just single bits. It is just single bits of these with the bridge decking, and then the next bit. And in that case, it's a steel bit. But when you have these assemblies, they call it, that have all the X-bracing in it, it's a tower, and then you have the next tower beyond it with, you know, with whatever span that you make that span with, then it's a tower. And there's a decent trick for making these, and I've used them at the bottoms of my signals so far, is to use a key off from I would call it an old-fashioned keyboard, but a lot of people still use the full height mechanical key. What's typically referred to as an IBM style keyboard or a PC 105 keyboard. It has those big tall keys from the keyboard.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Take them off and save them because they have a little bit of a indentation or whatever, convex or whatever curve in it. If you save them relatively flat, paint them with some
epoxy,
right, that would work too, and that makes it bend or a tower. Now I think I'm going to cast mine out of plaster, but that is a neat trick potentially.
So there's that double one. That's all done with just pieces of plaster.
That's spectacular. And I'm a fan of plaster for the way it colors. I will, give Lloyd some credit in the styrene. I think that styrene construction may be one of the
there's that bridge
ways to build a custom pier or abutment is with styrene, plus the Walthers piers are also styrene these days.
Yeah. And it's a little trick to try to get them to look like they're concrete.
That's why I like plaster, and the reason that I hand lay track, and as many people know, and for whatever, is that it's easy for me to make wood look like wood. It's easy for me to make a very porous surface like plaster look like concrete. And I haven't really tried actually working with real concrete. I think the texture would be a problem there, and I'm not really willing to mill marble. So plaster is just the best compromise for what I'm trying to do, I think. But if I was probably better,
you can use cement, providing you don't add sand to it.
Okay, that makes sense. Using the raw mortar. I mean, that's what grout is. Grout is Portland cement, just the cement. So, what's that, Tim?
Nothing. I was thinking myself.
So, bridge type matters. Of course, I mean, I love trestles. My prototype had a range. Actually, there's two prototypes crossing across my current layout, and they used some different considerations. I love when multiple bridge types meet. So, doing a little bit of research, and if you're modeling a fictitious railroad, or if you're modeling a prototype railroad, the Santa Fe or whatever, but you're modeling a freelance geographic section of the railroad, you might want to look at pictures of what the Santa Fe did elsewhere on their line, so you could choose either deck girders or through girders or steel trestles or wood trestles, depending on the amount of traffic that your railroad and the weight of the service that needs to be carried over there. So a little research would do you well to find the right bridges and the right bridges for the right situations.
Yeah, the right bridge for the gap you've got to span.
That's absolutely, exactly. And I think maybe as much as anything, so the gap you're going to span is going to, if you have a very high gap, you're going to be spanning that with a steel girder or a big arch bridge, concrete, some masonry arch bridge construction like Andy Montasuco's done with his, 25-foot concrete arch bridge, or a trestle, which those cover great heights really well. If you're covering lower heights, then Pratt trusses or through truss bridges, or if you could set piers in the water, you could use through girders or plate girders, as I have on much of mine, because the railroad is only, say, 30 or 40 feet above the river, so they can set piers. So choosing the right bridge, and then the bridge that you're using will set the consideration. So bending a trestle, much like Lloyd has, or what I'm doing with my steel trestles, bending that around a curve is not too hard. And something I want to point you guys at, Microengineering has a PDF document on their website that will teach you about how to make the angles, figure out the angles for the mating surfaces of these bridges and how much to cut off of these. Now, what I found difficult was how to cut these things in such a way as that I could make the end mates look convincing, because you want those, especially I did, wanted those rivet lines and mating surfaces between the panels to be in realistic places. So Microengineering's got some reference on that. I'm sure you could do it in software and figure out the angles of it. It's just a matter of, and this may come back more to my argument about how to get easements. While I think doing the math on easements is fine, heck, it may even actually be better, I just don't think that it's better enough to justify it over using the bit stick method, which Rod Marsh did a great video on his channel sometime a year or so ago on his YouTube channel about how to configure or how to figure easements. You have to use those same considerations when you're figuring out these mating surfaces to figure out these correct angles. And either the technique that Lloyd and others of us have used by using flex tracks for it, or in my case, I use flex track and then use foam core to get a base. And then I figured out the clearances, and what I did is cut the straight lines on the edges of this thing. There's straight lines on it. And then I built the bridge to those straight lines. So I basically built the bridge up under the foam core prior to doing any track work. And then I can still fit it in there, but I won't need to now. I can now build the track work, but I had to cut all the little slots so it's set around there, but it dropped in place. I built the bridge around it, and then so I knew I had all the right clearances around that. Then I peeled the foam core out of it and started working on the track work separate. You guys, anybody else use another technique other than using flex track and doing it in, in 1-to-1 and doing it in real life? Has any of you guys tried to do this on figuring out with paper or with CAD to figure it out?
When I did that Pratt Truss bridge, I drew it out on paper when I was building it out of scratch. Let me screen share that here. If it'll work, but that's startup, and it's all I-beam and H columns.
Oh, that's right. I really wanted to get into this. You had scratch built this. Maybe a good point. So why did you scratch it first? Before we get too deep into how you went about it, were you looking at a particular prototype bridge or a picture of a bridge that you couldn't find a model of, a kit of?
No, I just wanted to see if I could do it and see if I could build it to actually support the weight that I needed it to support. So I just started, I drew it out on paper, designed it. I'd looked at several of the bridges that were built like this, and got the scale ruler out, measured, the track distances, which gave me the main width of the bridge. And I used the NMRA gauge and laid it down on the paper, centered it so I could actually get the side clearance of the bridge, which gave me the primary width, the main width of the actual bridge itself. So I could do double track across it. And then I actually drew all four, I drew an overhead view and a side view and an end view of the bridge.
Okay.
So I drew 3 angles of the bridge, views, and that's what I built it off of.
Wow. Yeah, that is doggone. We were talking about that last night. It's amazing how tall those are, and it's amazing how much more clearance you need as a modern era modeler than what you need in my era. And people talk often, and actually Ralph has talked a lot about how you can change your layout just by changing the rolling stock, maybe swapping automobiles. But if you're going to run 1950s equipment and 2019 equipment, you've got to design that from the beginning because clearances are massively different.
Yeah.
Well, I found that out after I made my camera car.
Okay, yeah, but that's the harder way to find that out, I think. But
and the other bridge I scratch built, this is all actual basswood on this one. The abutments are basswood, and the girders are basswood, and the deck is basswood, and it's ballasted deck. This is back when I was first, getting into the hobby. I tried to, do some scenery and didn't really want to spend a whole lot of money on buying bridges. So I just built one out of basswood.
Well, you could do it out of wood. We were talking about this once before. Cable scale bottle, or a cable bottle company that builds many of the kits that if you want to build a fine scale structure, and if you're thinking about buying a $300, $400 Craftsman structure kit, by all means do it. It's a clinic in a box. It's a good idea. But the cables, plate girder bridges are wood construction. So there's no reason you can't use wood to create this stuff.
But their truss bridges are spectacular too.
Mm-hmm.
The wood truss.
Is that? I haven't seen that one. I don't think. Actually, I may need to look at that for a highway overpass where I need a truss bridge. But I don't think Cable gets enough credit for taking a lot of modelers and turning them into Craftsman kit builders. They are a spectacular. Going from beginner wood kits or laser cut wood kits to fine scale structures, Cable is one of the best intermediates that you should probably build a Cable. My recommendation would be to build a Cable kit after you do your basic wood stuff.
But when you're talking about the research that goes into some of this, I go around and I take a lot of pictures of bridges. And this goes back into Ralph's weathering also.
Prototype photos. Because there's nothing that beats a photo for looking at how the bridge is actually weathered.
But even how it's built, how the various pieces go together, and if you're scratch building, where rivets are, and where rivet lines and where weld lines are.
And you're talking about the bents a while ago. Here in Indiana, there's a bridge that's built exactly like what you were talking about. And you can see it in the background there.
Oh, yeah.
Right, steel girders. There's 4 on my prototype, and I'm modeling all of them. And 2 of them are, about 100 feet apart. It goes off of wood across through a little cut as it goes across from one valley to the next, and then straight across the next. And they're both curved. That's going to be complicated. I'm starting with a straight one first.
This bridge here it's got your towers. And it goes back into, the span that you're going to, the gap that you got to span with a bridge.
Yeah.
And what looks, prototypical, what's actually going to be functional. I mean, if it doesn't function, there's no sense in actually using it.
Right. Forward matters. What it looks like matters, but they do serve a purpose, both on the prototype, obviously, but also on our models as well. They've got to hold the weight. They've got to have the clearance. They've got to be functional.
Just the way they're made, they will hold the weight. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I would agree. You might have to. You've got to mess it up. It's not that hard to get them to hold. I mean, we're not dealing with tons here. You're dealing with grams or ounces. They should hold the weight, no problem. It's actually quite amazing that trestles, be they wood or steel trestles, that they'll hold the weight. Because when you first start working with the parts that makes up this microengineering kit, you get a whole handful of bits and pieces like this. I've ended up with a whole box of various microengineering bridge parts. All these parts are spectacularly flexible plastic. They are not, these parts are not rigid. There's nothing to them. They're, all of them are. But as you start gluing pieces together, the first few you put together, because there's a lot of parts on this. Every single piece is 4 pieces making up a square. As you start working with it, it's real flimsy. Getting the right alignments, holding them square is quite difficult. But as you start getting more and more pieces together, it gets quite rigid.
And this bridge is actually down there near you, Andy. It's actually in between us.
That's right. Yeah, going across the Henderson, across. Actually, it's going across a really wide spacing in the river.
Yeah. And it's actually it's a double track bridge, but it's only running single track on. But yeah, I went down and got a bunch of prototype photos. and it's really nice because this one there's a park right underneath, so you're not trespassing on railroad property to get the photos. And this weekend I took some more photos when I was up at Monticello and got some interesting bridge photos. I can't seem to find them right now though. I moved them last night and
No, you can't find them.
now I can't find them.
Go figure, eh? Isn't that always the case?
They've got wood trestles, right, on some of that line that is that heritage line or tourist line, whatever. Is that
yeah, they do have some wood trestles on it, but that's all off in the woods. So you'd actually have to walk down in there, and when they're running trains, I don't think they think too highly of you being down.
Probably not. I do have to build a few of those myself, much like what Lloyd's built there, and build some. Now, in my case, I have to build pile trestles, which are very shallow height. They're only about an inch or so high, going across a couple creeks. I've got 2 branch lines that diverge from a curved main line. Coming off the curved main line, they diverge, go across a diamond, and then there's two trestles as they go up 2 different valleys. And I've got now the difference in a typical trestle that has big, tall bits, like this, but without the tower, is generally built from square stock construction, which I think is what Lloyd has built his from. That'd be a typical trestle. A pile trestle is typically built with some round, strong material, big, round material like big telephone poles, effectively, and
pile driven into the ground.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And then pile driven into the ground, and then little cross members on top. Yeah, there you are, like that. A pile, what they quote unquote pile trestle with square cross bracing. And I've got to build a few much like that. I really like the weathering on that. Whoever did that did a really good job. But that's the green just does it for me. That's beautiful.
That's one of the bridges I took a picture of this weekend. And the only I seen it off in the distance. The railroad doesn't cross this. They actually stopped before this, but I seen it off in the distance. So I go and I said, "Hey, I want to run down there before we leave and get some photos." Well, I was actually looking at this bridge off in the distance. That's what I wanted to get a picture of, is to see how they mated these 2 bridges.
Right, that's a good example. There's another way to mate this similar steel construction by using steel bits to deal with the height difference between those 2 different steel bridges you had there.
I mean, this thing has been weathered to be heck. There's concrete and steel bridge. There's a concrete bridge on one side and steel bridge on the other. Parts of the concrete bridge are no longer there. The steel bridge is, I believe, still an active line, and may even be Amtrak. But we ran down there to get them and come across, there's this old concrete bridge. You got this bridge goes across to give you the clearance over the other line. And while I was getting the photos, I looked down and I saw that the other bridge, the pylon bridge. So I went ahead and walked over and got some, decent shots for how it's constructed. See, here on this side of things, they've got a concrete pier meeting. The other side of it, they're using the steel piers to meet the bridge halves.
And I have some of that that I'm not even going to use, actually, so I may even send it to you. This is one of those urban style, where they're mating those 2 different steel constructions together. I bought it when I bought a bunch of microengineering stuff. I've got some of those kits that do that, and I just ended up not needing or not using those. And what I've ended up doing is just buying various bridges and bridge types. And when I needed a bridge, microengineering sells individual bridges, of course, but they sell kits with, say, two through girder bridges, and that also comes with 2 plate girders as approaches on either side. And they sell double tracks. And whenever I needed something, I bought the double track and bought the kits with multiple bridges so that I could get a box of parts. I'm running a little bit low on parts, but I've got, to build the bridges I built, had to cut up parts. I just treat it as a box of parts, and I've bought, ended up with a whole box full of bridge pieces, bridge guts.
Now, if you look at that, what is odd about the way that bridge is sitting with that bridge pier compared to most of them?
Well, it's either sitting straight on there or it's just sitting on a piece of steel.
It's sitting on a piece of steel.
Sure, I would expect that. Yeah,
that's where they call them the bearing plates.
I think it looks like it's just sitting straight on it.
It does almost like it, but if it's sitting on just a piece of heavy gauge steel, it'd be hard to tell that difference.
But that abutment is a lot deeper than it has to be. That looks like that's been added afterwards because it may have deteriorated a bit. Like it doesn't need to, that's almost 2 feet from the outside edge of the concrete into where the bridge meets the backside. Maybe even more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ties.
Also, for all of you guys in the chat, thank you, Brian, for posting that link as well. Several of the guys were talking about Marklet of Sweden. His is a great YouTube channel. All of us modelers should be subscribers to his work. It's really good. He does a lot of his work with either styrofoam or in a lot of cases wood, and skim coats it with a sand-based plaster and what have you. He's done a pretty good job of explaining that on his channel. So
his waterwork is good with varnish and toilet paper.
Toilet paper, all of his scenery is toilet paper and glue. It's astonishing. Yeah, his work is really quite good and very budget friendly.
Nice about having the high-res cameras when you go in and you're taking photos. Can't necessarily get right up in there in real life, but with a very high-resolution camera, you can zoom in on it and get your other detail.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we've run about an hour. Actually, we run a little long tonight. Anybody got any last-minute pieces to add to recommend for people for considerations? Of course, we've talked about different types of bridges, what some of us have done to get our alignments right, be that using FlexTrack. I think Lloyd's trick is a spectacular one, especially if you're wanting to use real wood ties. Using the FlexTrack, ripping the ties off is great.
I killed mine.
And mine. And then the different bridge types that we've talked about as well. We briefly discussed a bit about abutments and piers. I think you could do an entire show on doing some scratch building on that because that's can be a bit involved. Concerning yourself with the right bridge type for the right application, looking at what the prototype does. Very little on assembly, although that's pretty straightforward. It's like any other, in my case, it's like any other styrene structure. And while I typically prefer wood or hydrocal or other building mediums, depending on what I'm doing, plastic does a great job of representing steel work. And if I had all the time in the world, I would build them out of brass. And actually, I may at a later time go back and do some brass work. Ralph shared something with me recently from RMC, Railroad Model Craftsman magazine, had an article a month or two ago about scratch building plate girder bridges from brass material, from brass sheet stock. Also, a really nice reference is the Archer. Archer makes weld line and, most importantly for us, rivet decals or decals, either or. As a decal that you could apply to get those rivets. So you could build it much the way TNT would construct it.
Micromark sells those as well.
Awesome. Good to know. Yeah, you could use those on, and scratch build entirely from stock, from stock styrene L and I components and straight stock styrene, and then use some Archer rivets to get the right detail. Microengineering, Walther, Central Valley, any of these others. If you're doing anything away from what they're doing, as I recommend, treat it as a box of parts. I treat every kit that way anyhow, regardless. So you could build a bridge that matches, whatever you've got in your mind's eye or whatever you have found a picture of. We also got to touch on weathering a bit. Again, I think you could probably do an entire show on weathering steel structures versus steel rolling stock. Although you probably do want to look at the geography of where you're looking at. Whereas unlike a piece of rolling stock that moves across the country and the weathering would vary from them, I would imagine that many of your steel bridges built in the same era and in the same place geographically would probably be weathered quite similar. At least that's what I find from photos I've looked at. Otherwise, I think we've covered about everything else, unless we have any more questions from the chat. And tomorrow night, we'll have Joe Desmond, of course, discussing operations. So look for his show tomorrow night. I'll be there. So be there and be square. And thanks to everybody for joining us. Thank you so much, Tim, for popping in on us. And this time, that's very enjoyable. And Bill, of course, our whatever I called it earlier. He had such an interesting weathering technique, and his bridge is such a signature scene on his railroad that I really wanted to draw attention to that. So thanks everybody so much. We'll see you guys tonight on Joe Desmond, or tomorrow night on Joe Desmond's show, and then again on Thursday night for Johnny's Trade Talk. Thanks so much. Have a great night.
See you.
Later, guys.